I've broken into many servers, companies, websites, and devices I shouldn't have. Home computers, webcams, my college, multiple other universities, companies, wind turbines, and yes, eventually the US government itself. So let's start at the very beginning. I'll start with my first hacking story. So if you've watched my other videos, you know I grew up with very limited tech. Was very limited with how I could spend my time in general. And I had to be creative while homeschooled if I wanted any form of entertainment, really. Well, one thing I did when people weren't looking was mess around on the command line on the family Mac instead of doing homework. We had an iMac, and when people weren't looking, or even if they did look, they wouldn't really be able to understand what I was doing, and I would just kind of mess around. I just started by typing stuff in and slowly discovered things. I learned how to use Bash quite well. I learned SSH, Telnet, FTP. And if you aren't technical, what those mean, they're essentially ways to connect directly to other computers and devices on a network in various ways and share files, run commands on them to do stuff, etc. And my first hack, if you can call it that, was hardly a hack. So we had this software called Covenant Eyes, and Covenant Eyes monitored any and all network traffic. It blocked a bunch of sites and it monitored anything you accessed with a web browser on your computer. Now, most people, maybe my parents were trying to protect against like bad things. I just wanted to go to I wanted to watch Minecraft YouTube videos and I wanted to like learn stuff about the world. um, but I wanted to get past it and I wasn't sure how. And I knew we had a computer downstairs and I knew the login to it. And that computer downstairs we used as a like part of our kind of music studio. We were a very musical family growing up. But I knew I had a login to it, and I knew it didn't have Covenant Eyes on it. So I SSH'd over to it. I got root on it, which basically means I like full admin access. And I was actually able to web browse on it via like remote control, basically. Hardly a hack, but hack doesn't have to mean some sort of technical wizardry, right? The original version of the word hack meant just kind of a workaround, getting something to work in a scrappy way. So, continuing on from there, I somehow learned about telehack, an old BBS. So, I'm 27, I'm not even from the BBS era. People who are 40 plus watching this would understand what that is. BBS stands for Bulletin Board System, and they were text-based social media is the simplest way to put it. They had forums, messaging, emailing type deals on these things. And Telehack is one of the remaining ones. It's part BBS, part like gamified pretend hacking system. And all of this through like the Mac terminal or the command line. I made friends on there. I learned some basic scripting in Bash and Python. Um, I did some old school hacking practice over there while learning some basic real life hacking stuff as well. So those were kind of my high school years were spent doing that. Fast forward to a couple of years later. Uh, I'm doing my freshman year of college. Now, I wasn't allowed to live on campus, but I would spend as much of my time out of my parents' watchful eyes as possible. Like I did not want to be monitored by them, and I was still living at home. My parents were helping me pay for college, so they kind of had it over me. So I had to live at home, and I had a curfew. I could only stay to college until 8 or 9 p.m. I had to come home. So I would spend up until that point just about every evening. And I, would watch YouTube, do all the other things I possibly wanted to, catch up on all the TV shows and movies people reference because I wasn't allowed to watch those growing up. And often then I would get home and actually do a bulk of my homework then. But I'm there, I think it was 8 p.m., 9 p.m. in the library, somewhere around there. And I was bored. I didn't want to do homework. And, I'd spent probably most of the day outside of classes, like watching YouTube and movies and shows, talking with people. And I was bored, so I was obviously on my campus's Wi-Fi network, and I decided to scan the network. I used tools known as ARP and Nmap. I scanned out the devices on my university's network, and they didn't have what's called host isolation. And again, to the non-technical people, Host isolation means basically the router, your Wi-Fi router, blocks devices on the network from seeing other devices on the network. My university did not have that on, so I could see the IPs and the MAC addresses for every device on the network. Okay, that's kind of fun and interesting. Why don't I scan these for vulnerable ports? And down the rabbit hole I began to go. I found a bunch of devices I was able to take over very easily. I took over the baseball field scoreboard. I actually never did anything with it. I regret never pranking that. That would have been funny. Um, a bunch of random devices. I took over the printers, actually. The printers did not have any admin credentials set, and I was able to connect to them with like no like authorization and was able to set the admin stuff. And printers, like printing off stuff, we had like print credit and you had to pay for it. And when I was going to school, which was 2015 through 2019, my professors, a lot of professors still required stuff be printed off, which sucked. I mean, completely, you guys, that's so behind the times. Um, but you had to pay for it. And let's just say I didn't pay for it anymore. I also could remotely like print off random stuff in classrooms that had printers, so that was kind of funny. I pranked some classrooms with that. But yeah, not having to pay for print credit was nice. And then last but not least, I was able to figure out these control boards which control the projectors in classrooms. Like they kind of managed the screen share between the they were the middleman control boards between the computer that the professor had and the projectors, speakers, etc. They were made by Extron. These were Extron control boards. And I dug up the manuals for these things, which were really old, and was able to remotely control 1, 2, 3, and eventually every single one on the campus. As you can imagine, that led to some funny stuff. I would be able to turn it off randomly. I could play random cricket sounds. I honestly didn't prank as much as I should have because no one would have been able to figure out it was me. I even set like I closed the door behind me as I went in because I would take over these devices and then instantly turn on all of the highest level admin stuff and give myself the password for it, which I might still have to this day. I don't know. Um, After I had my fun, by the way, fast forwarding a couple years for a second, I took these hacks to the university IT, who I worked for at the time, like part time as a student. And I explained to them, hey, Telnet is open on all these devices. You need to do this and this, blah, blah, blah. And the senior IT, senior in quotes, big air quotes here, the senior IT guy goes, what's Telnet? Now, again, if you don't have any, history with tech or whatever, understandable. But if you're a senior IT guy, if you're a low-level IT person, you should know what Telnet is. It's an old protocol that's often very unsecure and very easy to, be able to connect devices and take them over. He didn't know what Telnet was, and nothing happened. So, rewinding back, I took over all of the projectors on the campus. I had my pranks there, but a new era was about to dawn. I call this one the Extron expansion. I used a site called Shoutout to search for more stuff on the internet with the same ports open as the Extrons. My idea being, oh, maybe there's some other places that aren't just open with these ports and these details inside their networks at universities or companies, but outside. And sure enough, there were a few. More than a few. Like a lot. Stanford, University of Nottingham, UPenn, a dozen others or so before I got bored of it, all used these same control boards, and I was able to take all of them over as well. Some companies, I won't name some of the others, but Comcast was one of them. And I played a prank on the University of Nottingham actually on April Fools. I turned off all of their projectors at once, and I want to say I played a sound or something. This is like 8 years ago now, so it's been a while. But yeah, that was pretty funny. So moving on from those, that kind of opened me up to like, the world, in hacker terms, the world is your oyster, right? Like, I could access other things. And I also want to make it clear now, like, my motive was mainly to just have fun. There's two things I was motivated by. One was pranking, because I thought that would just be funny. But the number two, which is more fun, is kind of almost the, I don't want to say kleptomaniac, but the part of me that's like, can I get, like, is it possible? You see the building that's under construction, you're like, I wonder if I can climb to the top of that thing and not get caught. That part, I never, I never aimed to do any harm or anything, or make money off of it. Would have been nice if I could do that in a moral way, but I wasn't gonna like steal people's stuff. But yeah, so anyways, I continued utilizing Shodan, and turns out you can find tons of publicly accessible security cameras at random spots, offices, homes, building security, outdoor, indoor. Um, and my brother was going to Liberty University at the time, and he told me I couldn't watch his courses and I couldn't get his classroom. And I was able to. That one took a little bit more effort, but fairly simple. They had some publicly accessible security cameras. You have to know how to search for them. So that was kind of crazy. That was fun. So it's around this time I discovered SQL injection. Now, for the non-technical crowd, you might be like, what the heck is SQL injection? Well, think of SQL as a database. It's the language used to access databases. Um, and there are forms on the internet, right? Some forms, I mean, if you've ever bought something, right, off of like a Shopify site, you have to enter your username or your, not just username and password, you have to enter your like email and your name and all this stuff into a form and hit enter. Well, a lot of websites utilized PHP, which is it's a programming language, and a lot of old PHP has this opening/weakness where you can kind of throw some random characters in there. It's a lot more complex than this. I'm very much simplifying it, but you can throw random characters in there and it will trick it into giving you access to the whole database instead of the part that it's just supposed to insert into. So I would use Google Dorks, which is basically specialized Google searches, to search for these vulnerable sites, to find websites utilizing PHP forms on the internet. I would utilize SQL, like basic SQL injection, to see if they were vulnerable. Then I would use a program called SQL Map to fully break into their entire database. SQL Map was basically automated SQL injection written in Python. It's surprisingly easy how many I could get into and what was in there. I saw hundreds, perhaps thousands of names, emails, phone numbers, credit card numbers, social security numbers, and other info. I never did anything with them. I'm not evil, but I legit saw thousands of these over the couple dozen sites I was able to hit with this. Yeah, I continued on, showed on Google Dorks and a couple other random things to source just interesting targets. They cooked. It cooked for a long time. They probably still do to a certain extent. A few other random things I was able to access. A gas station. And now you might be like, what? The meter that keeps track of the amount of gas that's in their, like, I don't know what it's called. The cistern, the big area that holds all the gasoline beneath the gas station. For some reason, some of those were publicly accessible. A wind turbine, which is kind of crazy. And the craziest part is that the wind turbine had controls to do stuff with it. Now, I didn't touch them because I happen to know that wind turbines, if you mess with some stuff, can either spin too fast or too slow, and they can shatter and break and cause like ridiculous amounts of damage, which would cause an investigation, which would probably lead back to me. I'm really not some sort of elite computer hacker genius, but hiding behind 5 VPNs and 2 or 3 Tor nodes, you know, I in a library that I went into with a mask on, like I I would have been fairly easily catchable probably. So I didn't change anything, but it was weird that I, could have. There's a bunch of other stuff I hit that honestly doesn't come to mind right now. But the coolest one of all the random things was a traffic light. And yes, those are accessible from the public internet in some cases. Um, I was able to access it. I was able to access the full control board. Um, Weird enough, I did not see any direct like control to change the light from a red to a green, right? Frankly, it was my dream. I'm like, I'm not going to randomly do this. I'm going to get like, it's going to randomly switch and somebody's going to hit somebody and I'm going to kill someone. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But I always wanted to be able to have control of traffic lights to do the classic thing, like, sometime when it was safe at like 2 a.m. and no one's at my back road intersection. Um, and I can do the hacker thing and press a button on a keyboard and make it switch. I had access to the camera. I could see the feed that you see those cameras above traffics. I had that. I couldn't find the control to do that, to switch the lights. Now I know it exists, but I think it's like on a different system or maybe it's hidden. I'm not sure, but it's kind of sad, but still a cool thing to access. And um, I left a little file in there that I made on that little server for if anyone else accesses it. I can't even remember what it said. That only just came to mind now, but I remember leaving a little message behind for like future hackers. That all happened, basically all of that happened freshman year of college. So at this point, it's now sophomore year. I talked with my parents, was able to move onto campus, and I spent way more time with people, doing different activities and stuff, playing a lot of video games. But I still did some hacking for fun. This is when I hit the big fish. This is the payoff. This is the title of the video. So I was trolling for some interesting open SSH telnet connections on Shodan, as I did every couple days, just to see like, is anything, trying different filter sets and seeing is there anything interesting showing up. Because the big fish is always like a government or military thing. And I was using some different filters to narrow my search, and then I saw it. .gov. Specifically 2 results actually with the same sort of search. One was a NOAA.gov, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but it's like the weather, and commerce.gov. And I was like, oh, Department of Commerce, there's money there. Both these are cool, but man. And I was like, okay, let's try to access one. Because keep in mind, I would find a bunch of different things when looking through this, but most of the time I just wasn't good enough or didn't care enough to spend the hours or days trying to hack to get into something. If I wasn't able to get into it in 10, 20 minutes, I moved on to the next one. It was mainly a kind of a fun thing for me. So I was like, okay, well, let's just try to access one. No, I probably won't be able to. I've run into government websites on these things before and just not been able to get in, whatever. And I tried my usual methods, and this was dumb stuff. Fingerprinting the router /OS it was on, and trying vulnerabilities towards that, trying default passwords, looking up old telnet device documentation, digging through it, running some basic tools against it. I'm really no genius. And I think it was the first or second thing I tried worked, and I was in. I typed in ls, which in a Linux or Mac, properly Unix, command prompt lists out the folders and files that you're at. And I see named a bunch of different things. And I'm immediately like, a kid in a candy shop. But this kid in the candy shop looked up and saw something very scary, which was I noticed right when I loaded in, I'd hit list, ls so fast, I'd missed this banner that popped up, it all in text form. And I scroll back up in the terminal window, and I noticed the banner I didn't read. And the banner said, unauthorized access will be penalized with 25 years of prison and a $250,000 fine. Now, it's one thing when you see this FBI warning or whatever before a movie you've pirated or whatever, because you're like, well, they're going to have to give those fines and prison time to like 10, 100 million other people, because everyone pirates movies, right? Or at least has at some point. But this one was traceable back to me. You know, like I was just sitting there like, here I was just messing around on the internet, and I'm jump scared with like a real life big boy decision. I could look at those files and start dorking around and risk paying the consequences. Or I could leave now and hedge my bets. So after a good 30 seconds of hard deliberation, because I didn't want to spend too long, I decided not to ruin my life. I used a VPN plus Tor plus an anonymous email to email the government admins telling them of the opening. The hope was that if they did track me and my very illegal entrance, me admitting to them keeps me out of the hot seat, kind of going to prison until I'm age 50, and owing hundreds of thousands of dollars is not it, and, this is a government server. Like, they will track you down. They probably already were on me once I accessed. And I actually got an email back from a colonel in the U.S. Army thanking me for what I had told them and that they would take care of it. Thankfully, I wasn't going to prison for half my life and fined a year's worth of future salary. So, deep breath. I still accessed commerce.gov as well. A similar story, mainly because I wanted to say I'd broken into it. So I got into both, but I did not look for government secrets. And often I look back and I wonder, like, should I have or should I not have? But I think I made the right choice, because as much as it's, cool to the idea of, oh man, I could see some interesting files, maybe I could leak something. Like, real life consequences happen to people who do that. Really real. And I wasn't using anything. I don't even think I was using a VPN at that time. Because I was just randomly accessing and then leaving different parts of the internet without a trace. People weren't bothering. But government server, oh, yeah, they can go through a bunch of network logs. They can figure out exactly where I came from within probably 15 minutes. Down to the university, down to the device within the university within an hour. Not good. So that experience basically scared me straight. I've done some messing around since then, but nothing significant. Actually, that's not exactly true. I took over a local coffee shop's router a couple of days ago for fun. As it turns out, people still use default device usernames and passwords in 2025. Don't do that. So, life lessons. The first one is that necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes the pressure of having only a small number of options causes you to be very creative with the options you do have. That was my situation at home, right? I had very little things I could do for the tiny things I could, I learned everything about them, became really good at them, and ended up, launching me in this hacking route, but I also, got my career in writing software off of it. Second, I'd say the second thing is, as much as I think taking risks is usually a good thing, sometimes the safe option is the right one, specifically when the consequences are severe. Now, I want to throw in the caveat, like, risks in general are very good. That's how I found my wife. That's how I've gotten nearly every single one of my jobs. That's how I got my career. That's how I've made the best memories. That's how I've made the most money. Risk is a very good thing. Do not live your life purely avoiding risks. if the risk is talk to the girl and the worst thing that happens is she makes fun of you in front of her friends, and the best thing is that you find love for life, the downsides are small compared to the upsides, right? Is talking to that guy that that family friend, and trying to see if you can get a job under him. What's the worst that happens? He shoves you off. He kind of ignores you. So almost no downside. And the upside is what? You have a great career or something. Those are situations where taking the risk, in most cases, I would argue, is worth it. In things like this, the upside and downside are a different kind of balance. The upside is question mark. Probably I just find some interesting files, maybe probably some completely boring ones. And the downside is what? 25 years in prison? Holy crap. So yeah, when the consequences are severe, maybe going the safe route is good. And the third lesson is that hacking, which I say in quotes, really is way easier than you would think, even nowadays. Even if you're not a technical person, I helped someone, I believe, in college hack, quote unquote, something, access something they weren't supposed to in like 20 minutes, just talking them through it. Their first time. They weren't even a technical person. And the lesson really is, I'm not a genius. Other people are just dumb with technology. That kind of goes in general. If you're an arrogant personality, it's important to realize that it's less you being a genius and more everyone else being dumb. Do not put yourself on a high horse. Most people just aren't applying themselves at all. So yeah, that's the story of me and hacking so far. Wink, wink. No, I don't think I'm gonna. I mean, if the world comes crashing down and I absolutely need to, oh yeah, I'll open that valve again. But for now, I think I'm going to leave it shut. Comment if you have any questions or thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks. See ya.